Right. So we find Chitraketu Maharaj had delivered an amazing apology before goddess Pārvatī. And one of the key points there was that it is perfectly all right to ask for forgiveness, even if we have not done anything wrong. And the platform at which Maharaj Chitraketu operated while begging for the apology was very, very exemplary for the whole Vaishnava community. And therefore, Lord Shiva now turns to Parvati and mildly chastises her and at the same time glorifies the qualities of Maharaj Chitraketu. So, Chitraketu's reply to Parvati's curse contained the philosophical truths about the conditioned souls as well as the Supreme Lord. And Lord Shiva is now going to further distinguish between the conditioned souls and pure Vaishnavas in his speech to Goddess Parvati. And in this section, there is one very, very important verse that Lord Shiva speaks. So let's see how Shukadev Goswami introduces this. So Shukadev Goswami says in the verse number 26 that thereafter, in the presence of the great sage Narada, the demons, the inhabitants of Siddhalok, and his personal associates, Lord Shiva, who is most powerful, spoke to his wife Parvati while they all listened. So notice very carefully that Narad Muni was also there in the assembly. So in other words, here Lord Shiva is speaking to Parvati not privately, but publicly, and extolling the qualities of Maharaj Chitraketu. So Lord Shiva speaks, "My dear, beautiful Parvati, have you seen the greatness of the Vaishnavas? Being servants of the servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Hari, they are great souls and are not interested in any kind of material happiness. Devotees solely engage in the devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayana never fear any condition of life. For them, the heavenly planets, liberation, and the hellish planets are all the same. For such devotees are interested only in the service of the Lord." So this is the great appreciation. You can see that Lord Shiva carries for Lord Narayana or Lord Krishna in his heart. That Narayana para sarve na kutaschana vibhyati. Swarga apavarga narakeshu api tulyartha darshanaha. So he didn't say that, okay, my devotees never fear any conditions of life. Okay. Lord Shiva is speaking to Parvati in this very, very momentous occasion. And he is saying that devotees who are solely engaged in the devotional service of Narayana never fear any condition of life. Now, because this is such an important verse, our acharyas have written a lot of commentaries. So we can see that both Lord Shiva and Parvati have witnessed the qualities of Maharaj Chitraketu. And in this whole course of events, there had been multiple different sort of twists and turns. Like, for example, Lord Shiva's public intimate association with his wife. That's number one. Number two, Chitraketu's sort of feeling a little pride in his heart. It's innocent, but it's a little pride. Then Chitraketu's apparent minimization of the elevated position of Lord Shiva. Then number 4, Parvati's improper cursing of Chitraketu. So in this way, all of these sort of imperfect manifestation of the various conditions, they are all ultimately leading towards realization of the greatness of a Vaishnava. And therefore, what we have to understand that is that Krishna's mercy is hidden in everything that happens. So Chitraketu accepted Parvati's curse, even though he did not deserve to receive that curse. And he was completely surrendered to Krishna's will. And so he accepted that curse, even if Krishna's will was manifesting in the form of the curse, he totally accepted on his head. And therefore, this conscious attempt to please Krishna in every circumstance of life, even if the circumstance may lead one to a very, very uncomfortable situation, is called Bhagavad Dharma or devotional service. So Maharaj Chitraketu demonstrated this. So therefore, Prabhupada writes in the purport number 27, expanding on the dialogue between Lord Shiva and his wife Pārvatī, that my dear Pārvatī, so this is Lord Shiva speaking to Pārvatī in Prabhupada's words, you are very beautiful in your bodily features, certainly you are glorious, but I do not think that you can compete with the beauty and glory of devotees who have become servants of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, Lord Shiva smiled when he joked with his wife in that way, for others cannot speak like that. The Supreme Lord, Shiva continued, is always exalted in his activities. And here is another example of his wonderful influence upon King Chitraketu, his devotee. Just see, although you cursed the king, he was not at all afraid or sorry. Rather, he offered respect to you, called you mother, and accepted your curse, thinking himself faulty. He did not say anything in retaliation. This is the excellence of a devotee. By mildly tolerating your curse, he has certainly excelled the glory of your beauty and your power to curse him. This is very, very interesting way of putting it, that by mildly tolerating your curse, he has certainly excelled the glory of your beauty and your power to curse him. I can impartially judge that this devotee Chitraketu has defeated you and your excellence simply by becoming a pure devotee of the Lord. And then Prabhupada concludes by saying, as stated by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Taror api sahishnuna. Just like a tree, a devotee can tolerate all kinds of curses and reversals in life. This is the excellence of a devotee. Indirectly, Lord Shiva forbade Pārvatī to commit the mistake of cursing a devotee like Chitraketu. He indicated that although she was powerful, the king, without showing any power, had excelled her power by his tolerance. Such a wonderful statement. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur adds further light to this particular verse by saying like this: if the curse you uttered in anger cannot bring the slightest unhappiness to Chitraketu, then what good is your curse? Alas, it has proven powerless and useless. So from this day on, therefore, do not treat great devotees like this. And this is the lesson hidden in this particular verse. And then comes the 28th verse, which is such an important verse, that the devotees, by virtue of their strength of devotion to Narayana, they are not fearful of any condition of life. So this is bringing out the reason behind an exalted Vaishnava's consciousness. So Prabhupada writes in the 28th purport, Pārvatī might naturally have inquired how devotees become so exalted. Therefore, this verse explains that they are Narayanapara, simply dependent on Narayana. They do not mind reverses in life because in the service of Narayana, they have learned to tolerate whatever hardships there may be. They do not care whether they are in heaven or in hell. They simply engage in the service of the Lord. This is their excellence. Anukulyena Krishna Anushilanam. They are liberally engaged in the service of the Lord and therefore they are excellent. By using the word Bhritya Bhrityanam, the Bhritya Bhrityanam appear in the previous verse, okay? Lord Shiva pointed out that although Chitraketu provided one example of tolerance and excellence, all the devotees who have taken shelter of the Lord as eternal servants are glorious. They have no eagerness to be happy by being placed in the heavenly planets, becoming liberated, or becoming one with Brahman, the supreme effulgence. These benefits do not appeal to their minds. They are simply interested in giving direct service to the Lord. And Srila Jiva Goswami writes in this particular text in his Bhakti Sandarbha, and he is commenting on the value of impersonal liberation, because here the three phases of life, which are generally considered to be very lofty, are considered practically useless from a devotee standpoint, whether achieving a heavenly planet or going to the liberated state. And then he contrasts that with maybe going into hell. They are all the same. In other words, from devotee standpoint, these have no value whatsoever. Achieving heaven, and here liberation is connoting the merging into the Brahman, and gliding down to the hellish planets. They're all the same. Why? Because all of these conditions, they are not giving them an opportunity to serve the Supreme Lord, because they are only interested in serving the Supreme Lord. In this way, the devotees remain fearless in all circumstances of life. So here Jiva Goswami picks the liberation and points out that some, according to their own understanding, think that impersonal liberation is attained by the mercy of the Supreme Lord. But this liberation is only that person's imagination and is therefore a product of modes of nature. Since it is opposed to bhakti, it is only a shadow or abhas of mercy and therefore rejected as hellish. So this is how Jiva Goswami notes that liberation, which is kind of in pursuit of impersonal Brahman, can be directly compared to hellish achievement. And then he notes the purity of the devotee, that they are indifferent to both material happiness and material distress. So in one sense, this impersonal liberation is the height of material happiness. And likewise, achieving hellish planets is the height of material distress. But the devotees are completely indifferent to both. Then Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur points out in this particular verse, why are devotees so great? And he answers, taking this verse as a focal point, because they are fixed in Narayana. That is the only reason. Not only Chitraketu and others, but all devotees are fearless. Swarga, liberation, and hell are all equally disgusting to them, since these lack the happiness that comes from performing bhakti. So you can see the loftiness of this particular verse. All those ideologies about trying to aspire for heavenly delights or seeking the so-called liberation of Brahman they're all considered to be disgusting from the lens of a pure devotee. And who is speaking this? This is spoken by Lord Shiva. And that's what is the most interesting thing, because Sripad Shankaracharya is considered to be an incarnation of Lord Shiva. And all his followers, they are taking this whole flag of impersonal liberation as their key goal. And here Lord Shiva himself is speaking that as far as pure devotees are concerned, that is hellish. So that's what makes this verse even more interesting. Then Lord Shiva himself goes into comparing the natures of conditioned souls and the Vaishnavas. So therefore, Lord Shiva says that on the other hand, conditioned souls or conditioned jivas inevitably suffer the dualities of material existence because of their tendency to try to enjoy the material energy. On the other hand, the Vaishnavas, they transcend the material world and its dualities by practicing devotional service, which generates in them perfect knowledge and detachment. So Prabhupada's purports in these verses 29 through 31, they are first of all diagnosing the disease of material conditioning and then offering a cure. So let's go one by one. So text number 29, Prabhupada writes, those who are not Narayanapara. So this is, you can see the contrast is happening with respect to pure devotees who are fearless, already established in the 28th verse, because of their steadfast position in devotion to the Supreme Lord. So here we are talking about conditioned souls who are not Narayanapara. Therefore, Prabhupada is writing, those who are not Narayanapara, pure devotees, or in other words, those who are not pure devotees, must be disturbed by the duality, by this duality of the material world, whereas devotees who are simply attached to the service of the Lord are not at all disturbed by it. For example, Haridas Thakur was beaten with a cane in 22 bazaars, but he was never disturbed. Instead, he smilingly tolerated the beating. Despite the disturbing dualities of the material world, devotees are not disturbed at all, because they fix their minds on the lotus feet of the Lord and concentrate on the holy name of the Lord. They do not feel the so-called pains and pleasures caused by the dualities of this material world. Oftentimes this question comes, does a devotee really feel pain? So this is an interesting perspective that is presented in the last part of this purport, that because of two things. One is that the minds of the devotees are totally fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord, and secondly, they are concentrating on the holy name of the Lord. So because of the depth of their immersion in the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord, because of the depth of their concentration on the holy name of the Lord, they do not feel the so-called pains and pleasures which are caused by the dualities of the material world. In other words, the devotees are always above the dualities of material existence. Then purport number 30. Everyone in this material world is distressed by miserable conditions. But Srila Prabhudananda Saraswati says that this world is full of happiness. How is this possible? He answers, Yat Karunya Kataksha Vaibhava Avatam Tam Gauram Eva Stumaha. There's a very famous verse, this Vishwam Purnam Sukhayate. So from devotee's angle, this material world also appears to be full of happiness. Why? A devotee accepts the distress of this material world as happiness only due to the causeless mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. By his personal behavior, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed that he was never distressed, but always happy. Where is the happiness coming from? Not from the dualities of this material existence. He was always happy in chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. One should follow in the footsteps of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and engage constantly in chanting the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Then he will never feel the distresses of the world of duality. In any condition of life, one will be happy if he chants the holy name of the Lord. Such a strong conviction with which Srila Prabhupada is writing this. And then finally, in the 31st text purport, Prabhupada glorifies the exalted position of devotional service, that one who engages in unalloyed devotional service to Vasudev, Krishna, automatically becomes aware of this material world, and therefore he is naturally detached. So this is, you can say, knowledge and detachment, they are byproducts of unalloyed devotional service. So because of unalloyed devotional service to Krishna, they automatically become aware of this material world, and therefore they are naturally detached. This detachment is possible because of his high standard of knowledge. The speculative philosopher tries to understand that this material world is false by cultivating knowledge, but this understanding is automatically manifested in the person of a devotee without separate endeavor. And Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes about the excellence of bhakti in his commentary to text number 31 by this, these wonderful words. The devotees have no other shelter in this world. Nothing attracts them. By pursuing only bhakti, they make no distinctions between good or bad material objects. Just see the nature of devotees. So you can see these are all, in one sense, elaboration on verse number 28, which is the foundational verse that Lord Shiva speaks, that because of being solely engaged in devotional service of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is indifferent to all circumstances of life, and therefore one cannot be stricken by fear, which is generally caused by the dualities of this material existence. We will learn in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam this point, that bhayam dvitiya abhiniveshatah syat, that fear is born out of our absorption in the dualities that are presented by matter. But if someone has already become indifferent to the dualities of this material existence, how can fear affect such a person? And that is the key point that is highlighted here. So next we will get into the nature of the universal controllers, the super soul, and that's how we will conclude this section, which is spoken by Lord Shiva. So Lord Shiva is just going into his spree of glorifying the Vaishnavas, taking this instance that just happened before him. So thank you very much. Hare Krishna.